Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. And today's gonna be all about optics, scope design, all the features, all the pros and cons, and different give and takes when it comes to designing an optic. So we're sitting here with Jerimiah Alexander. He is the director of product design at Riton Optics. And so his day-to-day is optic design. He's been doing it a long time. He's a shooter first. He's an ELR guy. Lots of records and a lot of experience in shooting, and he transitioned that into his scope design efforts. So, Jerimiah, thank you for joining us. And
yeah,
why don't you give us a little bit of a rundown about just your background and then how you even got into designing scopes?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for having me, first off. Yeah, I was just a kid that loved shooting to start with, right? I never actually thought I would be able to make money and have a job doing it. So, 19 years old, I finally, had enough money to go out and have the big bore, cool guns, 33-78s, shooting 800 yards and thinking it was amazing. Started reloading. Just always kept through that, took all the training classes I could get. About a decade ago, started training with a buddy of mine, Navy SEAL Charlie Melton. As back far as 2017, I think we had the record shot back then. It was like 5,025 yards, I think 2.89 miles. Kind of kicked off the long range shooting stuff back then. And just every time we could go shoot as far as we could, we did that. With him training lots of different people, you just hear lots of different things. What people want, what people don't want. And I had opportunity to start with Riton. So I kind of was a shooter that had to learn all the optical side and design versus an engineer that had to learn how to shoot. So, man, just been shooting and loving shooting literally my entire life. Compete, everything I compete in and do. Long range mainly. That's the one that makes me happy, and we do more than anything.
All right. So with an ELR background, obviously you have the idea in your mind, the perfect scope.
Yeah.
Right. But then you have budget constraints. So it's how do you take that perfect scope that's probably going to have to cost at least $5,000 to bring it to market? So how do you take all these things that you want and need in a scope and then put that into maybe a $1,500 price point that's the consumer's going to get?
Yeah, no, it is. It's hard. Well, and let me just start by saying this too. Everybody wants U.S. made, right? Because that sounds better. We all want to do that. You don't do that if you want to build a $1,500 scope. That's awesome, because we build stuff here in the U.S. And it'll cost 3-4 times as much. So you have to find places and people that do a great job, and you can do the great price. But I always said it's a scope, right? It's a device to look through. So I always start with glass. I want to find the best possible glass I can. Start on that, and then go through whatever it is we need. So if it's a hunting scope, if it's a tactical scope or a long range scope. So for the long range, right, I want turrets that are tactile, feel good. I want lots of internal adjustment. I want to be able to have a nice clear picture. For me, I want a nice reticle. So that's part of the design. We design all of our own reticles in-house. So yeah, you start with a good piece of glass, and you work your way back from there with just good materials and good craftsmanship, and honestly, good quality control. Because we all have lifetime warranties now. No one should even brag about a lifetime warranty because everybody has one. So what you should brag about is having one that no one ever has to use. So the QC process, so going over the scope really well after you get it is a great thing to do. But yeah, to go back, yeah, good glass, good turrets is where I start fundamentally, and then I kind of branch out from there depending on the price point.
So from a shooter's perspective and not a marketer's perspective, because I think that's two completely different things. Marketers are what's the buzzwords? What are people looking for? What do people think they need, right? Mm-hmm. But then you got the shooter's perspective, which is actually, in reality, what people need and want. Or maybe they don't even know they want it, but that's what in reality, they need. So from that perspective, say a $1,500 scope, what are the features that you're making sure are put in there and put in there properly? Yeah,
so, the marketing is what sells just about everything. So there's a lot of these buzzwords and things like this, and first and second focal plane always coming up, and the size of the tube always comes up. I want the least amount of weight and size to be able to do the best job. So if I can have a 30 millimeter scope that has 150 MOA of internal adjustment, well, I would rather have that. But sometimes they just say 34 millimeter tube, nobody even looks to see what kind of adjustments in it. So I look for turrets that are tactile, that I can feel. move that are the same every time, that are the same like all the way through. So let's say if I have 100 MOA of adjustment, but when I get to the very top or very bottom, it's going to be the very top because I'm not dialing down, it starts to get inaccurate. Well, then I don't have 100 MOA of internal adjustment, right? So I'm looking for like legitimate stuff that works the way it's supposed to, the way it's supposed to work, that functions the same every time. Repeatability, out of a scope. HD is this thing that like pops up all the time. It's like this buzzword for high density. It's not high definition, regardless of what anybody says. So, how dense the glass is better for a number of different reasons. But there's no line in the sand, pun intended, that says this is HD. Like, this density makes it high density. So if I were you, I would say kick the word high density out. It doesn't even... When everyone wins, then no one's a winner, right? When everything's high density, then nothing's high density. So that's a buzzword. The ED glass I look for, extra low dispersion glass. We can get into that a little later. So yeah, I mean, really, I'm just looking for something that's like repeatable every time, that's accurate, that functions the way it's supposed to function, has a lot of internal adjustment, a reticle that I can work with, that's clear, that has a parallax that I can focus, say, down 10, 20 yards and then out to infinity. Because like we'll do the 22 NRL stuff or those other things, and being able to parallax down pretty low starts to be a big thing for me. So those are some of the things I look for.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was just thinking about like durability.
Yeah.
Like how durable does it really need to be? Are we dropping them out of helicopters, or are we rattling around in a razor while you're driving up to a hunting location? Like how rugged, in your opinion? Like you break things, you have to for your R&D. So where do you find?
Yeah, everything breaks. First off, right? There's nothing that's like unbreakable. So it matters where it breaks and why it breaks. All of our scopes are like 1200 G rated. The thing is, when anyone says it's however many G rated, that's how many G's, like G force rated, it's like rearward for the most part for recoil. Well, when you drop your scope on the top, that doesn't have anything to do with rearward G's that are coming out of the scope. So you need to look bigger than that. So we build the walls of our scope about 20% thicker than most of the competition, because scopes don't usually die from being fired in the recoil. They get dropped. They're sitting on a truck and they lean over and bust. So having multiple screws on the turrets to hold them down and things like that helps. Building out of good 6061 T6 aluminum helps, because if you've ever seen like a 50 cal or a big gun under like slow motion, it flexes, like the scope moves. And so that's like, you want to bend like a piece of grass, right? Not like be rigid like a tree. So like it needs to be solid, but to be able to move a little is a good thing. So that's why that aluminum is used so widely. And then the tolerances. So the mag rings get dirt and crap in them. I think that's a durability thing, right? If junk can get in your scope like that, that's a problem. So good O-rings and things like that help to make your scope more durable from the things that are actually going to break it. Most people drop it, and that's how it gets broke, not from recoil. But for your marketing versus real life question, everyone talks about what caliber it can be shot on. We have $200 scopes you can shoot on a 50 cal all day because they're built right. The tolerances are tight, they're built right. But if you drop it off of the top of your house, it's probably gonna have problems. So those are some of the little things. The tolerances are a big deal like that. The right kind of aluminum. Even the way the glass is put in so that it can move with the scope, just a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you can't just be rigid. Like that's not going to do the trick. A little bit of movement, but like it comes back to that original shape is probably the best you could hope for.
Nice.
And tolerances, man, because the elements get in there. Or if you're a hunter, dude, like, and you ever been out, you wake up in the morning and there's like frost everywhere, like that kind of stuff will eat a scope up if you're not careful. The different like changes, or like moisture getting in there and then freezing, that busts a lot of stuff. So which that comes back to like the right seals and tolerances and things like that, if that makes sense.
Dang, yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. And for the record, so our scopes are all 1200 G rated. For most people, that probably means absolutely nothing, right? What does that even? 50 cal with the clamshell brake that most all 50 cals have, roughly like 560 something G's. So we're well above 50 cal on everything, because you have to be, because it isn't just one shot, it's over and over and over again. So we should be good to go on everything. We've had our red dots on 50 cals and they've done good. So I don't suggest that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you got, if it can last on that, it can make it just about anything.
Huh. So let's talk. Let's get a little bit more insight on the scope. So, and this is also like a big marketing thing too, where, for a long time I've been just a first focal plane guy. Like I remember when first focal plane really started to get popular, and it's like I needed to have a first focal plane, and they were super expensive. They were way more expensive than anybody else, and now everything's first focal plane. But as I get more into it, and maybe that's part of reticle design too, but like when you zoom all the way in, it covers your target.
Yeah.
When you zoom all the way out, the reticle's so fine you can't hardly pick the damn thing up. So
yeah.
First tell us the difference between first focal plane, second focal plane, and then what do you prefer?
Yeah. Well, and I'll even go back further. Like it would seem as though first focal plane came into existence, I don't know, that's my opinion, like 15 years ago. Things were like, have you heard of first focal plane? It's old. Like in the UK and Europe, they all had first focal plane scopes long ago, and then it kind of phased out and was all second focal plane. So it's not that new even. It's just like a resurgence in what it is. But the difference is, the best way to explain it is in a second focal plane scope, my reticle stays the same size as I zoom in and out. So it's not going to look like it changes at all. So the relationship between the target and the reticle does change. So because my target gets bigger and smaller, but my reticle doesn't. With first focal plane, my reticle is like inseparably connected to the target. So as I grow the target, my reticle grows with it. The plus side to that is obviously I don't have to remember all of the subtensions on what power I am. So first focal plane is useful for that. Whatever the subtensions are that it says, it doesn't matter what power you're on. Those measurements in the reticle are the same. In a second focal plane scope, say you have a 4 to 20 power scope, second focal plane, and there's 2 MOA hash marks. Whenever you see a reticle measurements, by the way, it's always on maximum power if it's a second focal plane scope. So on 20 power, those are 2 MOA hash marks, 2 inches at 100 yards. So if I go from 20 power to 10 power, since my target changed and my reticle didn't, the relationship's off. So now it's a 4 minute of angle from gap to gap where it was from 2, if that makes sense. Because that target changed, my reticle didn't, I have to account for that. Whereas with first focal plane, you don't. And as far as like all the hype around it, like in all the long range, we were talking earlier, and I was like, I like second focal plane for long range because exactly what you said. Either you got a reticle that's unusable on low power, which it usually was, or it covers your entire target when you're on maximum power because it grew with your target. With a second focal plane, it stays nice and thin and crisp on the higher power. So I like second focal plane for shooting out long distance because my reticle doesn't cover up the whole target. So I think people like first focal plane because they think you'll hear this a lot. The subtensions are only correct on maximum power. Like that 4 to 20 that has 2 MOA hash marks. They're like, it's only 2 MOA on that. Well, that's not true. You just have to know how to reverse it and what they are on each of the powers. But that poses obvious problems if you're competing or hunting and you're trying to remember what power you're on and what size the reticle was when you started. So it can be confusing. The main thing is know what you're going to do with it, right? What's the use, and buy for the use, and then know how to work it. But I hope that explains the difference in first and second pretty well. So
for sure,
you hear about it a lot. You hear about first and second a lot.
Okay, so the other big notable part on the scope is the objective lens. Mm-hmm. What are some of the relationships between the size of the objective, how much light's coming in, how that relates to your field of view or whatever? Yeah, well, so again, like I'm going to try to keep honest to the marketing perspective versus the facts. Let me like so if I have like a 500 horsepower engine and I'm bragging about it, but it's in a 40,000 ton truck,
well, it sounds like a lot of horsepower, but it isn't, because it's trying to pull too much. So with that in mind, like, in theory, if the objective's bigger, well, yeah, it can catch more light. But the erector assembly has to be done right. The main tube being bigger has to be right. The other thing I talked to you earlier about, I think is really important. So yes, to some extent, you get more light in through it, but there are other factors associated. That's not the only, like, you don't just get more light because it's bigger. The bigger it is, you can get more light, but you have to have some other features in there to be able to maximize that light that's coming through. One thing I think that's a big deal is recoil. We were talking earlier. I would say on a scope that recoils a lot, and so it moves when I shoot, a larger objective, like you said, field of view inside that scope, it gives me a better field of view. And what that does is, so I shoot and recoil, and if I want to try to come back onto my scope and see where I impacted, if I have a 24 millimeter objective, I'm never going to be able to circle back into that, but a larger objective can help me out with that. When I'm shooting a gun like a 22, I don't necessarily need that objective to be quite so big as far as getting a second sight picture and seeing where your shot landed. So I think that's a big consideration. Again, for hunters, because that's the other thing, like, long range precision, nobody's shooting long range at night or dusk or dawn. So what does the light matter? Well, what just doesn't? It just doesn't. But the field of view matters. So then to me, it doesn't matter how big the objective is, because again, that's a marketing thing. The objective could be huge, but the field of view not as much as you think because of the eye relief. So look for the field of view. And if you're going to be a hunter, definitely look for something that is going to draw in a lot of light. But coatings are another big part of that. I think we'll get to at some point in that. But that's my soapbox on objective lenses.
And with a bigger objective, you're dealing with more glass and more weight.
Correct. Yeah. More money. Yeah. For the most part. Yeah. And
the objective, does the size of the objective have any relation to your eye relief?
No, not necessarily. Not that. The field of view does, but that's what I'm saying. Like, be careful. Just because it has a big objective doesn't mean it has a big field of view. It should, but it's not. It's not in stone.
They're not locked.
That's it. Correct. And just because of physics, this is what I tell people about field of view and eye relief. If I had like a toilet paper tube and I put it all the way up to my eye, right, my field of view would be enormous, right? But my eye relief would be 0. But if I put this tube in front of me, like, I can barely fit half your face in it. So when you're looking at a scope, if you just want good eye relief, well, be careful, because your field of view is going to be drastically impacted. So the better your eye relief, the worse your field of view, and vice versa. And then yes, depending on how it's built optically, the bigger objective could come in handy for the field of view. But the eye relief is huge. Like I said, I could put a huge bell on the end of I could put a 100 millimeter bell on the end of my toilet paper tube right here. It wouldn't matter, right? It wouldn't matter. So nothing is set in stone. Like, that's a good thing with scopes, is like, there's a give and take with everything that you're going to get. So don't just go look for one thing specifically. Kind of look for overall. Like, if I want a good field of view and a good eye relief, then you're going to have to, like, pick something in between. You're not going to be able to just have the best eye relief and the best field of view at the same time. So pick what's most important to you and lean that way is my recommendation.
Yeah.
But again,
and eye relief to me is really super subjective and dependent on the person. Because I know my youngest son, he takes advantage of a long eye relief because the stock's too dang big for him.
Right.
So his face being farther back, he's still able to take advantage of it because the rifle doesn't fit him.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of hard because, like I said, if the gun recoils a lot, then a big field of view is important. But eye relief is pretty important if you're shooting a big caliber gun too, because you don't want to get smacked in the face.
Right.
So there's always those kind of give and takes. You really just got to figure out what's most important to you.
All right, so we covered the objective lens, and the next big feature is going to be glass. And there's a lot of different terms for the glass, but like, how is it even made? I think there's got to be multiple ways that glass is manufactured. and which makes some better than others.
Yeah, I mean it's like anything. The purity of the ingredients is a big deal. So again, you could have the best glass maker in the world, and if the sand and medium that they're using to make it is corrupted, then it isn't good glass. So yeah, you have to, like anything, you have to start with good materials. Japan, honestly, and Europe has glass making down really well. Glass is one of those things, though. There's picking the right glass, the quality of glass, right? And then there's picking glass that's been ground really well, right? Because these glass all is curved. And then the coatings on the glass, which you can talk about later. But when it comes to picking glass to design a scope, price point is a big thing that you look at, obviously. But it's almost like a window shopping. So it's like I have a catalog that I look through that I'm picking, say it's shot glass that you want to look through. You look at a catalog from shot glass, and you go through the different price points and tiers of glass they have, and you pick it. You look at the weight of it, you look at the clarity of it, light transmission. But again, say brand X and brand Y can both pick shot glass, but both have different coatings. It will look like totally different pieces of glass. So really the glass is pretty well done. We've got that down to a really great science. Most of the new stuff that's happening, I think, is with more precise grinding of the glass, and then the coatings is huge. Like I toured a Swarovski factory a while back, and they had a big piece of glass that only had coating in the middle, and it looked like there was nothing in the middle. You poke your finger through the middle of the glass. It was incredible. So yeah, you pick good glass, but that's really just stage one. You could probably take a really crappy piece of glass and grind it really well and put amazing coatings on it, and it would look like an amazing piece of glass. So, but yeah, it's like catalog, it's like window shopping. You pick a good company that makes glass, and again, it's just condensing down. We know like sand and things like that are what you use to make glass. So they fire it up, condense it down. The density, where we talked about high density earlier, if the glass isn't dense, then the light can bend and reflect off of those particles. So the denser the glass, the less any light goes through it, does anything but just go through it. So you do want high density glass, but you just can't have to look at the glass, because there's not any real. I challenge someone to put something in the comments that's like, this is the metric to measure. It becomes high density here. It's a catchphrase that you can say, and since it's not measurable really, everybody can say it. So it's kind of a bummer, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's why with Riton, I was like, we changed our tagline to see the difference, because I'm like, everybody's saying HD or ED. I'm like, why don't you just look through it rather than just let someone market you something that's amazing? Look through it and see the difference. That's where that came up. You'll see what high density means with us if you just look through it. Yeah. Which is what I recommend. Go look through a lot of scopes.
And then what is ED?
ED is not a male problem. It is it's extra low dispersion is what it means. So if you've ever seen a prism, white light comes through a prism, and it disperses into the rainbow, right? And that's dispersion of light. And since there's multiple pieces of glass in a scope, that's happening over and over again. And the more dispersion of glass you have, the less the quality of the clarity, the less the colors. Like your edges of leaves, like the fringe on the edges is a little fuzzy sometimes. So extra low dispersion glass means that through the glass itself and then through the coatings, they do a good job making sure, and the grinding, make sure that there's the least amount of dispersion of the light spectrum all the way through that glass. If I would say, yeah, ED glass means more to me by a long shot than HD. And listen, we're guilty of it too. But when you say HD ED, it's kind of like, if it's ED, by default it's HD glass. So, and again, I'm calling us out because we'll say it's HD ED glass. It just sounds good. If it's ED glass, it is HD glass. So if you find ED glass, don't even worry about trying to find HD. It has to be extra like high dense glass to even be considered extra low dispersion glass,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Right. And I'm just thinking about this now that we're talking, but like the inside of the tube, is there a coating on it that's non-reflective, or is there something is that a consideration, like how you finish the inside of a tube?
Yeah, so you want light that comes into the tube to be absorbed. Otherwise it's bouncing around in there. I wish I could show like a display of like atoms bouncing around. It's really fascinating how chaotic light is moving through an object. But yes, there are special coatings that you put in the tube of the glass. But you had it right on. You don't want it to be reflective. And that's why it's black, is because it's going to absorb all the extra light that isn't focused. Because, I mean, the light needs to be focused straight down the middle of every one of those pieces of glass. And anything that ventures off of that track needs to just be kind of absorbed inside of there. But you're 100% right. Yeah, it just absorbs the light so that it doesn't become a problem bouncing around in there.
Yeah. And this is coming from welding, but you got the inert gases that use like argon and stuff in welding. But like, do you fill the tube with a gas that doesn't mess with light, or?
Yeah, the gas is less about light and more about
Corrosion, maybe, or?
it's more about like the elements. So if you've ever got out of a hot car with a scope into a cold environment, it like fogs up, right? The gas's job, one of the gas's job, is to prevent things like that from happening. So, and you'll see nitrogen and you'll see argon. The higher end scopes have argon. Basically, argon is just a denser gas, so it's smaller molecules and there's more of them. And so it fills more gaps, lets less things in than nitrogen. Nitrogen isn't bad. Argon's just a little better. But argon's a denser gas. And yeah, it keeps things clean and fresh in that environment. It pushes things out instead of things coming in, right? It says under pressure, under gas pressure. So it's going to keep any foreign things from coming in. But really, for the most part, I would say that the difference in temperatures, it helps regulate that so that you don't get a fog over. Probably at some point, if you've shot scopes long enough, you've come out of a cold place into a hot place or vice versa, and your scope's all fogged up. And that's because the temperature inside and outside has caused the problem. Those gases kind of help with some of that,
Just
but
buffers
they
that a
keep
little
that
bit.
stuff out. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. You
Cool.
definitely want, and you want purged and filled. Like you just don't want it filled. Right, so they use the gas to purge everything out of there that they can, and then in an EPA clean room, they'll fill it and then cap it off. Yeah, so it's like anything else. Like if I have a glass of water, I don't want to just add something to it to have that thing in it. I want to dump all the water out, and then add it. So that's the purged part. To clean everything out, and then under pressure, while everything's out, fill it with that gas and seal it off. And it's kind of its own little ecosystem and environment in there. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Nice.
To me.
Yeah, no, for sure. This is a rabbit hole that I know nothing about. So I'm just going to let you talk because I don't even know what questions to ask.
Okay.
But coatings.
Yeah. So just Jeremiah's opinion, coatings have been the biggest advancement because we've been putting glass in aluminum tubes for quite some time, right? Mm-hmm. So what's better? Like what's better is a question, right? Is it new glass? That's not new glass. It's glass. Better glass, better coatings. There's a couple things to consider. There's when you look to buy a scope, it'll say that the lenses are coated. And that usually just means the ocular and the objective are coated. Usually with an anti-scratch and an anti-fog, one layer coating. If they're like multi-coated, then that ocular and objective will have more than one coating on it for different things. So it'll be anti-reflective, anti-fog, it'll let light in, and like scratch resistant. And then there's fully coated, which means every piece of glass all the way through has a layer of coating on it. What you want is fully multi-coated, which means every piece of glass in the scope has more than one layer of coatings on it. Because if I'm looking through a lens that's incredibly clear into another lens that isn't, well, it doesn't matter that this one's coated anymore, right? So, You need to be fully multi-coated, every piece of glass all the way through, which is hard to do.
I was gonna say it sounds expensive.
Yeah, it's hard to do. And then, you know, because of NDAs, I can't talk specifically about what the coatings are. I can say that they're usually rare earth minerals type things like that are what the coatings are. On top of that, the way that the coatings are applied is as important again as the coatings and everything else. It's really cool. The latest kind of machinery we have is you'll put pieces of glass, let's just say in a box, right? And then they'll put these coatings, these say minerals and different things inside of the box with it. They incinerate the minerals that are in there. So they're like equally in the air everywhere. Really, they've filled the chamber up in equal parts per micron or whatever. The glass, because it's hot, the pores on the glass have kind of opened up, right? As we know, like that's kind of like what happens with that. Same thing happens to your body, right? You get hot, your pores open up. The glass does the same thing. And then in like an instant, it's like vacuum sucked out. And the air is sucked out of there. And what it does is, again, equally, it's amazing. It's like, it's crazy the scopes are as good as they are, quite honestly. It's hard to do. But so these minerals are just floating around in this chamber with glass. And then through the process of sucking all the air and everything out, the glass that's now open to accept the coatings is kind of impregnated equally both sides with those coatings. It's a pretty fascinating process to me. But yeah, most people don't even talk about how that's done. And you know what? I'll even throw a bone out. Zeiss has been able, is way ahead of the game. A lot of us are doing what Zeiss did years ago with the coatings. They're on top of their game. If you want to learn a lot about coatings, Zeiss, in my opinion, is the top of the game. And then I think I was telling you earlier, Swarovski does really good at grinding the glass because again, they're curved, right? And they're curved for a number of reasons, but mainly, I need light to go straight down the middle of that scope. And that curvature is a big part of why it does that. Along with that, if you've ever looked through a curved lens, right, like it flips the image upside down. And so scopes there's usually what's called doublets and triplets. So all throughout your scope, where there's one piece of glass, there's another piece of glass on the other side to rewrite that image, like to make it from upside down to right side up to upside down to right side up. So there's a lot of doublets and triplets. You may ask why we would do that, but again, because the glass is curved to funnel the light down the middle, that's just physics. One day when we find new physics, maybe we can do different things. But yeah, the coatings is, I would say find a company that has good proprietary coatings and that knows how to apply them properly. And you know what, guys? I'm sorry. Like if a sales guy has you in whatever store under like lights in the store, everything looks great. Everything looks great. So like you want to go outside, and you want to look in different conditions because everything is pretty bright and amazing in the store. But you start to be able to see the clarity and the coatings in different light environments and things like that. And again, there are low light coatings. There are coatings that do a better job capturing all the available light, regardless of how big the objective and the main tube and the erector assembly are. The coatings can do a better job of grabbing that light, and then the grinding on the glass does a good job of funneling it down the middle. So again, you can have a bunch, but if it isn't funneled in the right place, it doesn't matter. You can have a bunch, but if it can't get grabbed and caught up, it doesn't matter. So you want as much light as you can in a space available to accept it on a piece of glass that funnels it dead down the middle with a coating that grabs as much of it as it can to funnel it down the middle is the ideal situation. So if that paints a picture
heck yeah.
of sorts. So yeah.
I love it. Next thing would be reticles.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's multiple ways to design the reticles, but then having an erector and having that be consistent and then being able to run through your whole elevation range over and over and over and over and over again without it wearing out.
Yeah. So, well, first off, reticles, it's got to be perfect. You know what I mean? When you're shooting, even at 100 yards, if your reticle has imperfections of any kind, it's wrong. It's just not going to be right. So it's a really meticulous process. So I draw reticles on a program. and we send them to our designers. And what they really do is like redraw it in a way that works for the reticle factory. So we draw a reticle, we put it in a template format. So because the best way, people brag, again, marketing terms, people brag about etched reticles. I don't know who doesn't have etched reticles anymore. Unless you're paying $12 for a scope, it has an etched reticle in it. So like it's not really a bragging right anymore. It's just what everybody does, right? It's not a piece of wire or horsehair anymore. They're all etched. But that etching process is difficult, and the better you do it, the better it is. So you draw the reticle in a program, and then that program makes a template that fits over the piece of glass that the reticle is going to be on. So you put this template over the piece of glass, and then a chemical usually is applied over that template, and so it just etches the glass only in those spots that the template lets it get into. So again, the better that template is, and the more precise it's placed on that piece of glass, the better it does. And then they take that template off and clean it all out, and then they put like, you know, a black filler in there. Or there's, for illuminated reticles, what it is, they etch the reticle, they put like a titanium oxide in there, which is just reflective. It'll reflect any color, green, red, whatever. They put that chemical in there, and then they sandwich another piece of glass over the top of it, and that keeps that chemical in there and lets nothing get in there because there's holes, because the glass is etched. So then you have to cover that glass solid. And then they put, you know, an LED illuminator, and then it reflects that reflective material that's in the etched spots of the glass. And that's how you get an illuminated reticle. And again, there's varying hardness levels to do that. The best that I know of is omnidirectional etching. So wherever the LED light's going to be, they'll etch the reticle like a machine, not the template part of the machine. It will etch the reticle from the perspective of the LED light, so that it's the brightest, most perfect kind of illumination you can get. It costs quite a bit more. It's in the super high-end stuff, but again, that's what everybody will do pretty soon once they can get the machines and do it that way. But yeah, well, and so first in focal plane, the reticles aren't necessarily any different. It's just where they're placed. So if your reticle's in front of or behind the first or second, if it's in front of the erector assembly, then it gets magnified with your target. If it's behind it, then it stays the same, and your magnification changes. So yeah, first and second, that's what the different reticle. It's just where the reticle is located is what makes it first or second. And again, if it's in front of the magnification, then it gets magnified. If it's behind the magnification, like you look through the reticle, then through the magnification, then your target gets magnified, but your reticle doesn't.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Like one other thing with reticles, there's certain reticles that are branded.
Yeah.
And you pay licensing fees to be able to include those in there.
Yes.
And every company wants to make their own reticle that's different, and I just get confused because I have 7 or 8 different scopes, and I'm like, fuck, what scope am I looking through?
Yeah. Well, and you know what? This is an opinion, flat out, from everyone, in my opinion. So, my opinion is, if my reticle's like, I don't know, let's pick on a reticle, like say the Tremor 3. You let me know when you find someone that's like, I know the Tremor 3 like the back of my hand. Upside down and backwards, I know it on the, like if there's a 4th dot down and 3 dots over, indicates that a guy's on the move, like a guy running with something, like by the time I find that damn dot, the guy's somewhere else at this point. So like, I'm not 100% sold on the crazy fancy reticles. We're not in the Army, we're not in the military, we're not shooting people, right? The majority of all of us are shooting targets. And so through teaching over the years is where we made our reticles. Like I tell people, I don't draw our reticles necessarily. Like I draw them, but like, what's a good way? Like I take the ingredients from everybody's opinions and I make the soup. So I hear people that are like, I wish it had this. I wish it had that. I wish it was one of these. I wish it was one of those. And too busy is one of those things that's like unnecessary to some extent. Now, there's going to be some guys that argue how incredible this reticle is or that reticle. But I would say a reticle that's busy enough that you can use it. I say like battleship is how I use it, which is another thing. Like say I have a 10 MOA hold, right? So I could dial 10 MOA and I can aim in the center of my reticle. Or what I do, I dial say half of it. I do half so that I can remember it, because this is a great way to get confused about what you're doing. So I dial half of it and I hold half of it. Because if it's one of those tree style reticles, the reason it's bigger at the bottom is because in theory, I'm shooting farther out the farther down the reticle I am. And so I need wind more. Wind's more important to know where that's hitting. So if you dial everything and do dead center, then you miss out on some of those trees capabilities. So again, just Jerimiah. And I always cut it in half so I can remember what it is. I'll dial half and hold half so that I'm not at the very bottom of my reticle. I'm in the middle part of that reticle so I can utilize some of those wind holds. And then boom, I hit here. I just make that quick adjustment. So not too busy, but enough adjustments. And again, if you're hunting, in Tennessee, and the longest shot you'd ever take is 200 yards, well, just don't even waste your time with a crazy busy reticle. You don't need it. So again, buy the reticle that matches what you're gonna do. Competition or super long range, maybe you do need that fancy reticle. That military use, which is a small percentage, like there's advantages there, but people get caught up, like you said, the marketing part. Like, I gotta have the trimmer. Why? And most people be like, I don't know, it's the one everybody has. I'm like, why don't you use one that you can use and is like simple enough to use, and you don't find yourself completely lost. You and me been shooting together a bunch of times. We've both been lost. We've both said 4 mils left, and you're like, hold on, how many down? How many? Hold on. So you're counting little dots inside of there. You're like, so yeah, you want to make it simple enough that you don't find yourself continually. I draw all the reticles at Riton. I still get confused inside the reticle sometimes where I'm at. So yeah, don't overthink that reticle thing. It's not. I don't think it's necessary as often as people might think it's necessary. Yeah. So, which again, maybe it's not good for me to say, but I think it's the truth.
Yeah.
So
what's your process for when you get a new scope for your own personal use? You have it in your hand. Now, what's your process for setting it up for your eye? Yeah,
so this is a good question, because I think scope setup's wildly overlooked. People just slap a scope on and go shoot. So the first thing I do is I find the right size rings, because I want my scope as close to the barrel as possible without touching it, because then my cheek weld's going to be redder. If the scope's up real high, then I have a hard time. I want to be able to lay down my cheek on there and have that scope right in front of me. An adjustable cheek helps weld, but the closer, and then the higher your scope is over your bore, that bore oversight we talk about a lot is a problem. The less of that the possible. So I pick rings that put my scope as low as possible. I have a device that you looked at earlier, right? It's a real heavy machine that has a Picatinny rail on it. So you're gonna make sure you level your scope inside your rings. Real common mistake is you set your gun up on a bipod, you put your rings on, and you level your scope, and your gun was crooked, and you can't figure out why you can't get your reticle to be flat and straight, right? So if you're gonna do that, put a level on your gun and a level on your scope. Make sure everything's level. It's a big deal. The other thing is there's again, so eye relief, like we talked about earlier, that's important. I would say with a high power scope, I turn it all the way to the highest power that it can be on. And then I lay down and I get it where my eye relief is perfect. Because if I have an amazing, perfect eye relief on high power, then all the lower powers are for sure going to be great. But it doesn't work the opposite way. The ocular focus or the reticle focus is really big. So what I tell people is once you've leveled your scope, you've mounted it, you've got a good eye relief, lay down behind it, and use your parallax to make your target blurry, because that doesn't matter. So your target's blurry, so I can really focus on my reticle, and this is your ocular focus here, your reticle focus. So it'll be all the way in when you get your scope. So turn your power up where you can see your reticle good, blurry your target, and then you want your reticle to be crystal clear, just crazy sharp. And this will do that for you. The worse your eyesight is, the farther counterclockwise on our scopes you're going to back that thing out. The better your vision is, the closer to flush that's going to be. A common mistake is your eye is made to focus on things. That's what its job is. So if you just stare in this scope forever and you're trying to do this, like eventually it will look pretty crisp, but then when you come back to it, your eye will have to refocus to whatever that was. So I always say look through here for 2 or 3 seconds and then like kind of look away and take a couple breaths and look back until you get that thing kind of perfect. And more or less, I guess that's my setup. Don't forget that reticle focus, guys. It's important.
So we pretty much covered everything. And this might be a rehashing of a bunch of things, but like, just what advice do you have for a new guy going out to purchase a scope? Like, help them be realistic of what they need and look for, and like, how do they even know?
Yeah, so if you're a new guy going to like find a scope, again, don't be caught up in all the marketing terms and all those things, right? You're looking for a scope that fits your needs. So if you're a hunter, right, then you're not going to want turrets that are exposed and can get bumped on trees and things like that. So you know what I mean? Just know what you're going to use the scope for and buy a scope that is designed for that application. I would say the $200 to $700 range is where most people buy scopes. Now there's gonna be a lot of people I don't have scopes that price range, but that's all we do is shoot. So, but the majority of people buy in that price range. And I tell people, if you get real close to that $700 mark, save up and spend about $1,500, right? If you've got $1,600, just go ahead and still spend the $1,500 because there's just those gaps there. So from 2 to 7, you're looking at a certain quality of scope. Around $1,500, I think you get a really amazing scope for about $1,500. Can do everything that you need to do. But if you can't afford that, find one that fits your needs, that's either MOA or MRAD, depending on what you like and what makes sense to you. Everybody asks which one's better. They're just both. It's just math or math. Whichever one works for you and is easy for you, pick that one. Pick a reticle that you can work, make it easy and simple. And then just be clear. I mean, that's what a scope's supposed to do, right? Is give me a nice clear picture. Look at those reviews, make sure it tracks well. Because if you have a scope that you dial it a few times and it comes up a different spot, that's not good. So clarity, the features that you want, a price that makes sense, and look through it. Just don't be sold on what someone else's view through a scope is, right? Because there's a lot of different kind of cars out there. There's a reason why, because different people just like things that other people don't like, or see things that other people don't think are cool. So
yeah,
go pick what you want. Don't buy something because your buddy has it or because the cool guy has it. Like, pick something that works for you that you like. That's, I guess, my biggest piece of advice. Cool. That you know how to use.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for taking a minute to talk with us. We've been talking about doing this for a little while.
Yeah, it's been a long
So I'm glad we finally got a chance to do it.
Yeah, and I'll say we'll see what people think. There's spotting scopes and there's red dots and binoculars and prisms and 1,000 things to dive into. We can still dive into maybe later. And if we want, like parallax or the coatings thing, like we can go deeper on any of these things that people want. But I think hopefully this helps. If you listen to all these things, then you'll know a little more. And you'll shoot a little better. So
for sure. Well,
yep.
Cool, man. Well, thanks again.
Yeah.
And thanks for tuning in. And if you made it to the end, thanks for that. And be sure to check out Riton Optics and make comments. We'll have Jeremiah or I will be in there answering some of those questions and comments you have on there. And again, we'll see you at the range.